So in this week's video, I'm sharing how to deal with regret when you're in the grieving process. But first, if you're new, my name is Michelle Ferris. I'm a psychotherapist. This week, one of my dear friends died of a heart attack, and it was very shocking, and the first thing I felt was regret. And I realized that made the loss really different, because normally when I've lost people, and I've lost a few in the last year that were really important to me, it's very different when you have that added layer of regret. And that's what I'm going to help you work through. But first, what is regret? Regret is basically when we wish we did something different than what we actually did. And it makes it really hard to move on, because in any relationship, when we have regret, we can go back and fix it. But when the person has passed away, we can't. So the first thing I did, which I would recommend to you, is to identify what you regret. If you have that gut punch like I did of, oh, I wish I could have done that better. I wish I didn't say that. I wish I would have been more helpful. I want you to trust it and lean into it. Because even though this was really painful, this is where the healing is. Because sometimes, in a weird way, working through our regret will help give us closure. Because the last thing you want is to carry this regret moving forward. So the first step is to really have the courage to identify what you regret. For you, it may be an intuition or a gut punch like me, or you have a really negative thought or a dread. I want you to really sit with what that feeling is, because part of grief is allowing all of the emotions, not just the sadness, but the anger, the regret, the disappointment, the shock. And I know how hard this is, but this is how we get through it, by just feeling our way. And if you have regret, you're not alone. Say me too in the comments, because I'm right there with you, but you don't have to stay in that. These tips are going to help. So the next step I did was I made amends. Now you're probably saying, how do you do that, or they've already passed? Well, I'll tell you what I did. Before my friend passed, we were all in the hospital together, and we all had an opportunity to tell her what we needed to tell her. It was sort of like a last rites ritual of sharing. It was very lovely and very painful. And I took that opportunity because I knew in my gut I had to voice it out loud. And I was definitely embarrassed. I had to be honest and verbalize what my regret was, because making amends is what frees us from having to carry that pain into the future. And I don't want that for you. Now, the other way you could make amends is to go to prayer or meditation and say your amends privately. That can be another way for you to reach out to that person, even though they're deceased, so that you can create an intention of healing and forgiving yourself. The next thing you could do is to write a letter that you obviously won't send, but the letter is a powerful way to express the regret you're carrying and to let go of it. Because the person who's died most likely doesn't want us to suffer. But it really is part of this work to be accountable for when we do make mistakes and when we do things that we regret, because that's how we heal and get better. Now, the next thing I did, I tried hard not to beat myself up. And the first day, I kind of went back and forth because I really felt bad about a few things. But there's a difference between regretting your behavior and punishing yourself for it. And for the most part, I was in regretting my behavior. Because when we get into punishing ourselves and going into shame, it really doesn't help us heal. In fact, it makes us feel even worse. So if you have some regret right now, I want you to practice giving yourself some grace, which means cutting yourself some slack. For me, I had to look at the last year that I went through, where I went through a ton of caregiving and really heartbreaking things with 2 family members. And while I did the best I could, I knew in my heart, once she died, I could have done better. And that's what I want to carry forward. Because here's the other thing, nobody does this perfectly. Relationships are messy, and sometimes we look back with 20/20 hindsight, and that's just part of life. But if we can learn what we're meant to learn from an experience that we regret, we can get better in the future, and our relationships are going to benefit from that. And that's what I really want for you. Because admitting our mistakes gives us integrity and shows that we're really trying to be a better person. So the next thing I did, which I want you to do, is to find the lesson. Every situation, especially the painful ones, contain a gift. And I know that sounds cliche, but it's really true. And for me, the lesson was all about how I do relationship and how willing I am to take a risk and sometimes tell the truth and sometimes let go of the petty stuff. because both of those areas I need growth in. Now, if you don't know what your lesson is, that's okay too. I often recommend journaling and really starting to look at what lesson that could possibly be teaching you. And that's why looking at how we deal with regret in the grieving process can really be a profound source of change. Because one of the things I realize is practicing acceptance is really the key to lasting relationships. Now, some examples of finding the lesson might be to change your behavior or to change an attitude, or be more trusting. Everybody's lesson is going to be different depending on your own life experience, but it's an important step in the healing process. The next thing I did was I made what's called a living amends. And this is a 12-step concept that basically says when somebody dies and you can't make direct amends, you find other ways in your life to make a living amends. So for instance, I am going to be very involved in the services. I have been giving the husband food. I'm going to do things differently in my friendships in certain areas because I want to make those living amends. Because really what a living amends is a commitment to do better, especially around the behaviors that I am making amends for. So you can actually do this directly. For me, it's going to be looking at my relationship and friendship behavior in these areas, and some indirect ways of how can I be helpful and be of service, because that too can be a living amends. Because living amends is basically correcting your behavior in the future. And while this is never perfect, that's part of growth, is learning and embracing that we are imperfect and we are going to make mistakes, and that's just part of life. And I just want to take a moment to dedicate this video to my friend Janie. Now, your next step I want you to do is go watch a video on how to forgive yourself for past mistakes, because that too is part of how you can let go and deal with regret. Thanks so much.